Awesome. Thanks. It's awesome to first off just see so many faces back in person. Just really exciting. So my name is Brian Price. I'm CEO and co-founder at Kion. And so today I'm super excited to share some ways that you can hopefully help your organization with some effective cloud management. So a little bit about our company. So for the past 6 years, we've been helping a number of federal agencies and higher education institutions just help them apply effective cloud management and governance practices to accelerate their journey in the cloud. And today, I'll just talk a little more about some of the cloud security and compliance lessons we've seen and how to really kind of take those to the next level. So we'll go ahead and get started just by kind of looking through the agenda. One second. All right, so first, I'll share a little story to highlight some of the, I'll say, typical experiences that we see from most organizations that happen when they're managing the cloud. Then I'll introduce some different ideas, I would say, around what effective cloud management could look like. Just to accelerate that cloud adoption, we'll dive into some security and compliance best practices to help navigate through some of the one-way doors that we see sometimes organizations struggle with. And last, I'll share some specific AWS services and some partner solutions that may help along the way. So let me maybe start by painting a little picture for you. So let's say you're running a cloud PMO or a cloud operations team, and you get this request from, I'll call it this guy named Jim. He's trying to get a new AWS account for a brand new app that his team's building. So what happens, right? So typically that one request spawns many tickets, right? So if you're in the government, sometimes you have to go and put a ticket in with your cloud reseller to provision the new account. Next, you want to go to your cloud security team to set up some baseline services like CloudTrail, CloudWatch, GuardDuty, et cetera. Maybe a ticket goes to your identity team to be able to make sure that you're creating IAM users and roles and configuring SSO, applying baseline policies. After that, your networking team needs to set up a VPC and security groups, and then probably after about 3 more tickets by 3 separate more teams, you're able to go back to Jim and say, here you go. But before usually that request can be closed, usually somebody comes back, maybe Jim comes back and says, guess what? I need to be able to connect to my on-prem infrastructure, and actually I can't create any EC2 instances in that account. Oh yeah, right, that's right. Your request that you put in actually wasn't very clear about that. The networking requirements weren't in their request. We somehow missed the fact that it actually didn't go to the platform team to get AMI shared out to the account. And yeah, by the way, I guess I got to fire off now 2 more tickets to 2 more teams to go ahead and get that set up. And Bob is the only guy on the VPC team that actually knows how to connect a VPC to our on-prem infrastructure. So, oh yeah, that's going to wait till tomorrow. His kid's out sick. And so I can't get back to Jim until the next day. And maybe just then, if he's lucky, he can get to work. So fast forward maybe a week later, right? In your morning email, you get this daily report of all the cloud accounts that's been flagged for violating some level of security or compliance issue. And Jim's account that you provisioned just last week is on the top of that list. He's trying to use Amazon Kendra to make a search capability easy in his new app, but he did it in a GovCloud account. Didn't he know he should know better? Kendra is not a service approved by the JAB to run for FedRAMP high workloads. You'll never get an ATO doing things like that. You pick up the phone, you try calling Jim, you explain the situation, you walk him through how to tear down the infrastructure he and his team have spent the past 2 weeks on, and from a cloud operations team perspective, you say, phew, crisis averted. And then a week later, in your morning email, that you get your daily report of cloud accounts has been flagged for overspending their budget, you notice Jim's account's on the top of that list again. He spent $50,000 in the past 2 weeks. Actually, the past 2 days? How? What? Like, doesn't he know his app isn't given a green light and he's only got $5,000 to spend? What the heck is going on? You call Jim up, explain the situation. Oh, and you forgot that he left the cluster up over the weekend. So what? He is in trouble. And this happens over and over again, not just with Jim's accounts, right? But with John's, Jerry, Jason, Jessica's, Jamie's, and somehow we're still not innovating fast enough or hitting those cloud adoption milestones that the CIO asked us to reach. Have no idea why. How many people can relate to that problem? So all of these things in this example, like siloed IT processes, misunderstood security and compliance standards, long ATO processes, the shift of financial control from your engineers result in friction if cloud management is adopted the same way that IT has been managed for decades, despite cloud being vastly different. So let's now take a look at a just different approach. So what if we reinvent cloud management, right? Maybe an appropriate term for Vegas, maybe not so much in DC, but we'll reinvent cloud management. To enable an organization to move faster, right? What if we could make those processes more cloud-like, more self-service, more context to give people more room to be empowered so Jim could do more himself and he could wait less. So effective cloud management really enables you to focus on your mission. So the 3 principles of effective cloud management rely on agile but controlled self-service account provisioning, budget and spend visibility, allocation and enforcement with cost optimization context, and proactive and reactive controls that help to ensure security and compliance standards are met all the time, since cloud infrastructure is changing all the time. So today I'm going to focus primarily on the security and compliance best practices. However, all 3 of these are so interrelated and really have to be working together to create that really panacea of what effective cloud management could look like. So to get there, let's first talk about one-way and two-way doors in cloud management and governance. So whether you're new or experienced in managing cloud environments, guess what? You're likely to make some mistakes. Those unfortunately can be almost debilitating for some organizations, and they have the fear of making a mistake prevent them from being able to make a decision. And there are only a few one-way doors, honestly, in designing your cloud management strategy. And those, just to explain, right, those are decisions that once you make, it's difficult to unwind and change. So as a technical example, right, setting up your centralized auditing and logging as part of your landing zone, maybe through a service like Control Tower, is an important first step and a one-way door to make sure that you get right so you have the full provenance of actions that happen inside of all the cloud accounts inside of your organization. But waiting, let's just say, till you have the full set of all the preventative controls that you need implemented in your compliance standards isn't something that you have to make sure that you've got implemented. You can run checks first and see how far away you stand from those baselines, right? And frankly, those standards, they change pretty frequently. New services come online, right? So finding those balances around what one-way doors you've got to be very careful about going down, and also just making sure it doesn't prevent you from making progress in the cloud is key. So I'll go with the first one. So this is a big one that we see across pretty much every customer environment, but it's especially important in the US public sector, federal government. So it's really considering your accreditation boundary, right? So we have seen some agencies take this carte blanche approach where it is get an ATO for the entirety of AWS so that any workload can fall underneath of one giant accreditation boundary, but it doesn't usually give you a lot of flexibility and granularity if something changes, right? On the other side, we've taken and seen customers take a completely different approach where they've said, okay, we are going to accredit every single little app and little system in that, and that is a separate process. And both of those approaches, we find if you kind of blend somewhere in the middle, right, and you find this balance where, the ATO boundary should be designed, I like to use the analogy like layers of a cake, right? So where the bottom layer is baseline controls satisfied by AWS. So it's like the physical security controls, the IAM, like stuff that you're going to use in every single environment and account that you could possibly have, right? And then on top of that, there are a set of controls that are satisfied by maybe shared services that you've deployed in your environment that every tenant can take advantage of. And then at the very, very, very very, very, very top of that layer cake, right? You've got, a small layer of actual controls that need to be satisfied because they're unique per application workload. And by taking that approach, then you're reducing the workload that your individual tenants need to actually take to get into the cloud and be effective along their way. And so that obviously streamlines things, it helps to make the ATO process more efficient, and can yield quicker accreditations. So next, it's very important again on these one-way doors to think about least privilege, right? How do you implement that? It's so easy, and we see it all the time, and I'm sure people here that raise their hands see it all the time, of access that's over-provisioned in the cloud, right? And it's not always intentional, right? It's accidental if somebody needed to get something done, right? But that is something where you have to think through before you get to that point, right? How do you make sure that, you've got the level of ways to, not just ensure access is set up correct, but make sure you don't forget who has access. Make sure that you also don't forget how to revoke access and have consistent automated processes to do so. So most of the organizations we support today have moved to a role-based federation service using some sort of central identities. Like, so for some of our customers, that is with tools like using AWS SSO as an example, which now I think supports CloudFormation templates to make it easier to provision those inside of accounts. But it's important to get, again, that set up right at the beginning and automate it as much as possible so that as you begin to add more accounts and more resources, that just becomes completely automated, right? So I'll hit here just briefly on this idea of a multi-account strategy. How many people here understand what multi-account is? Cool, good, half the majority of folks, right? So the idea here is you use a multi-account strategy so that you actually limit the blast radius from a security and a financial perspective, so that if there's an incident that happens, right, maybe it is, unintentional permissions, or maybe it's something where there's something that happens in a certain application, it doesn't impact every single application across every single lifecycle environment, in your overall kind of cloud ecosystem. And so, again, this is critical when it comes to least privilege, so that you can quickly adjust permissions and specific roles across accounts, as well as the underlying IAM policies that were overly permissive, and fix those. And so last, but certainly not least, give you a little spoiler, right? It is impossible to plan for every single scenario and every workload, like Jim's new app, right, that needs to run in the cloud, right? You don't have a crystal ball, right? But what you do have to understand is there are exemptions that are going to be needed and required in the process. And so you have to think about how do you take not a one-size-fits-all approach, right? But how do you take an approach that really gives some flexibility, right? So you need to walk through how you plan on providing exemptions, right? You have to walk through, are they based on security baselines? Are they based on whether the service, like in Jim's example, he's trying to use Amazon Kendra that hasn't maybe officially been achieved its job approval for FedRAMP High, but maybe he knows it's on process and his timeline allows a little bit more time than currently, and he's doing a dev environment, that could be okay, right? You need to have the ability that you can have that flexibility in your organization. And so sometimes it's based on where the application lives in the organization, or maybe it's type, right? Is it internal or external? It's also just important to think about not just the what, but the who. Who has the approval to actually approve that exemption, and how do you make sure all the other guardrails are set up and in place despite accepting the risk of those different configurations? So the good news is, there are a ton of great services that AWS offers that can help implement some of these best practices, right? And, I'll just go through a few of them here, right? So AWS Audit Manager, if anyone's ever used that, it really helps to make sure that you can document and assess your current compliance status in preparation for a security audit as part of your ATO. Config conformance packs, they're pretty awesome. So they allow you to be able to make sure that you can have ways to check your AWS environment to check and remediate security findings. Control Tower, I mentioned before, but it offers the ability to deploy a landing zone instead of a multi-account environment. AWS Organization's been around for a while now. We actually, kind of funny enough, were one of the first companies to ever use Organizations before it actually existed to create new cloud accounts. But they help you create and manage AWS accounts. Obviously, they're in commercial and gov cloud regions. AWS Security Hub brings together multiple different AWS services like Audit Manager, Config Conformance Packs, and others, just to give you a really clear view of what your current security posture looks like. And last but not least, service control policies, right, which they help provide those preventative guardrails that can help make sure that when you're deploying, a multi-account strategy, you can set things up. You can even create OUs for exemptions and things like that that really give you a ton of flexibility around making sure that you can automate a lot of this. And where I'd say AWS services leave off, right? This is where partner solutions kind of can come in and supplement, right? So a lot of these native services can be extended. So, GitLab, we use it. How many people use GitLab? I feel like every software and government organization uses this, right? So serves certainly as source code repositories, right? But it's also the way that you can make sure that all of your shared services for version control and your service control policies, infrastructure as code, like CloudFormation templates, IAM policies, et cetera, are all versioned and available to be used in different ways. Splunk, which a lot of our customers use, right? Because they want to be able to aggregate cloud data, cloud audit and logging data with other data in their environment and have a complete picture of what that looks like. And TELUS Exacta, which is a tool that can kind of further extend some of the auditing capabilities to automate and send the RMF process so that your technical and non-technical users in your organization can really help through that process. So this is just to name a few solutions. There's a ton more out there. But where I would say is, at the end of the day, and this is kind of where I'd say we come into play and where we find, usually our customers find a lot of value. If you have some questions around how do you connect all those pieces together, especially in a way that works across cloud, environments like AWS Commercial, GovCloud, and here have to work in the high side regions like SC2S and C2S, or even across an environment where you're using other cloud providers, this is where kind of Kion is here to help. This is our bread and butter. This is where we kind of focus. So our cloud enablement platform really tries to provide this giant easy button to make assembly of all these pieces very easy, and again, whether they're available by AWS or others in these partner solutions that really help to restore that experience of what the cloud should be in the enterprise. So in today's session, we focused a lot around security and compliance. Out of the box, our platform has about 4,500 compliance checks that map back to nearly 24 regulatory frameworks that obviously they can help satisfy a ton of technical controls that are required. And the automation that we tried to build in that's super easy to take and use in our platform is really designed to make the right controls easy to implement, giving the right context to people for folks like Jim, right, to help them build better applications. So if you put it all together, right, so what if instead of Jim putting that request in, he had the ability to create his own AWS accounts? And end-to-end automation took the rest out of his hands and out of the cloud operations team's hands, right? With the right controls to help make sure all the FedRAMP high compliance standards and guardrails are set up, and there's actually controls around his budget too to make sure if he exceeds that, he's not getting just notified, but there's actually proactive controls that happen, right? And then, him and his team, right, instead of getting that call that gets passed down and passed down and passed down, they actually can see that context in real time to be able to make better decisions, and then ultimately the entire organization gets the right level of control with that delegation approach. So what happens, right? So waiting for cloud security and network operations teams goes from days or weeks down to minutes, right? Context is provided, controls restored, frictions removed, and the experience of the enterprise cloud, we believe, finally can truly drive innovation. So if the topics today resonate, again, and some of the challenges you're looking to solve with your team, we're going to certainly take some questions here, but I encourage you to stop by our booth, 419 in the expo hall this afternoon, meet some of the pioneers that are out there. They're experts in this stuff, and really we're really here to help you along your journey. Visit our website, obviously, kion.io. Just let us know how we can help. So we'll take some questions if anybody has them before we wrap up. Quiet bunch. Oh.
So do you support all the cloud platforms or just AWS?
So we do support all public cloud platforms with AWS, with Azure, and with Google, yes, to create a unified experience. But again, obviously, it's an AWS show, focus a lot on AWS services. There's a lot of other services that are out there, and what I would say any organization should really try to do is look at what are those essential requirements, right, that you want to make sure that you're automating, and see what's available in each platform, and then also kind of weigh that decision of buy versus build, right? Do you have the time and engineering and expertise to go ahead and build something, or do you want to buy a solution and have that kind of burden taken off of your team and focus on some other things? Does that answer your question? Cool.
Is this the only three CSPs, or do you also have flexibility for Oracle Cloud infrastructure as well as IBM Cloud?
Yeah, so today we primarily focus on those three CSPs. We're always adding other CSPs as demand warrants. So for all of our customers that we have that are using our platform, what we try to do is make sure we're always listening to them. We have a quarterly process where we meet with the customers, understand what's at top of their mind. That directly goes into our roadmap, and that helps us prioritize other CSPs to make sure that we're continuing to add what our customers ultimately need. So. Yeah, so we have a number of different ways to do that. So, obviously most people here probably have used AWS budgets, right? Awesome, especially as they started to add more and more capabilities there. What we've tried to do is give not just this view, especially with everybody, well, maybe not everybody here, but a lot of people here with the public sector lens on, where, financial controls can be very dependent on a number of different things, right? It can be dependent on the amount of budget that you have, but it can also be dependent on the type of funding that's actually funding that budget, right? When you get a bill from AWS at the end of the month, it's a single dollar amount, right? And then somebody typically has to break that apart. Maybe it's tags that you're using to break that apart. Maybe it's just based on the certain accounts. Maybe it's based on the certain services, right? But depending on how that happens, there could be different funding sources, right? It could be in the government, 2-year funding versus 1-year funding. It could be different purposes. You're getting a grant from outside. And so what we try to do is keep track of all of that within our platform so you can see that complete picture of what the financial kind of health and outlook of your organization looks like. And then you can set individual rules based on the project, or you can take the rules based on the type of funding. And so from that, you can then take action. So maybe sometimes you just want to be notified, hey, we got something going on, we've exceeded 70% of our budget, that's great. When you get to 90%, maybe it's a sandbox environment or a dev environment, you actually want to start to apply policies that restrict what people can actually do to create new resources in that account to increase the spend. And ultimately, when you get to 100% in a non-production environment, some of our customers say, guess what? We are basically removing the resources in that sandbox account or in a non-production environment to help make sure that we're preserving that budget. So we try to make that super simple and easy, so we have a whole budget enforcement actions capability that lets you trigger all those different actions.
What is the biggest differentiator of Cloud Native?
When it became Kion, what changed?
Yeah, no, great question. So when we made the decision to rebrand, our overall goal, I would say, went a little beyond what we thought about when we were taming clouds, right? Taming clouds was very much a very literal thing, right? Again, some of these things you probably look at, what we talked about today, it's somebody needs to control that, right? But what we saw was that if we do this right and we apply the right practices and the right approach and we have a brand new platform that we can build on, we can give people more context to make better decisions. When we give people more context to make better decisions, then all of a sudden cloud can actually basically live up to the benefits it's supposed to provide. And so with that, we kind of helped look forward and say, okay, well, for our customers that are really adopting really these best practices from a cloud governance and a cloud management perspective that really come together, they're really getting to a point where cloud is enabling transformation in their organization. They're enabling that growth. And so again, that comes with a lot of experience with a lot of different organizations seeing it a lot of different ways. And a lot of those practices is what we wanted to make sure is we can help make sure that we're aligned and we're focused on our customers' long-term success in the cloud and helping make that really go further. So when we launched Kion and we launched Kion 3.0, it's a re-platform of the actual application. So certainly you can look at it, oh, it's some nice new visuals, right? But the underlying platform there really helps us to build even more context to help people do even greater automation and get really more enriched data so that they have the information they need to feel empowered to make better decisions. Awesome. I think we have about 30 seconds left. So if there's no other questions, I definitely want to thank everybody for attending today and hope everybody has a good rest of the summit. Thanks. Oh, and I would be remiss, please complete the session survey. We certainly want to hear feedback. AWS does too. Thanks.